chat, which is coming to you from Poland. I'm not in Ukraine. I was thinking about where I was 1 year ago today, and the fact that the war is still on. And sorry, I've got the noises there coming from the playback from this video. 1 year ago today, I was in Bucha, and the videos which I took then still have not been published. I have it in my mind that I shouldn't publish things related to the war too much unless it's already appeared somewhere else. Having said that, Bucha, I hope, will not be occupied again by the enemy. However, what has been occupied today, it would seem, is all of Bakhmut, or nearly all of Bakhmut. We don't know. It's hard to say. And for some time, the Kremlin has been claiming that it's occupied all of Bakhmut, but we just cannot say. So if you have any questions whilst this is going on, then please do please ask, and I shall try to respond. Of course, as far as this battle's concerned, I'm none the wiser. I'm a very long way from where anything is happening. The people I knew who were there are not there any longer, and even if they had told me something, I certainly wouldn't be repeating it over the internet. Hello, Colin. Bakhmut as a town, I mean, let's face it, a year ago nobody even heard of it. I believe the first shells actually fell on the 17th of May of last year, I think it was, and it took, though, for the enemy to get up to the 1st of August before they actually reached the outskirts of the town. Now, I would suggest, in fact, that what was actually happening was that this was a pincer movement, which was from the north and from the south, and the idea was to meet around the area of Kramatorsk or Slavyansk. Now, hello, Annie. And so Kramatorsk is believed to be where the Ukrainian, it is the main points where the Ukrainians are actually the army is defending, and so it's the main basis. Anyway, so Slavyansk, I would say, looks quite normal being there. I mean, there's quite a lot of damage, but other than the damage, it looks quite like a normal city. Bakhmut itself, I haven't actually been to Bakhmut, but I have seen it from a distance, and it's sort of in a bit of a hollow. It doesn't really seem to have a great deal of significance, and to me, I think what the significance of this is that this is it's the name which has become significant. It's significant because of its name, which is it's totally illogical. It's a bit like the battle for Stalingrad, and I've often thought of it like this way, although of course Stalingrad had a strategic importance which Bakhmut doesn't have. Now, when we talk of strategy, something may be strategic in one war and not in another war. If we take, for example, the Battle of the Bulge, then we've got something like the Bastogne, which becomes super important and strategic because of its location, because of the fact that it was there's forests all around it, because of the fact there was armored thrust made in that area, and because the tanks couldn't get round it. So therefore it became of supreme strategic importance. But in other conflicts it may not actually be that. And now the only importance I can see anyway of Bakhmut is it's on two main roadways, so it's within 3 kilometers of two main roadways, and it was once on a canal. Sorry, it's the canal which links the Severodonetsk river with the Donbass Canal, is about 7 kilometers or so from the center, something along those lines. So in that case, it's that is the strategic significance of it. It's on the way. it could have been bypassed, I think, without any problems whatsoever. One thing for me, that a place which is further to the east, which is called Severodonetsk, and the other side of the river from that is Lysychansk. And the battles for these places, which took place in the early summer of last year, were in fact far more, I thought, of strategic importance, because Severodonetsk had its position but as far as Bakhmut's concerned, I just couldn't understand it. The name Bakhmut, in fact, it was renamed. In fact, the original name is Bakhmut, and the name, I think, it's a Tatar name or Turkic name, which comes from to with salt. Now, these salt mines at Soledar have become quite famous. In fact, they were famous before, because there is in Soledar is I think it's the largest. I think another video I said it was the third largest, but I think it's the largest underground auditorium even in the world. I understand there's been a couple of football matches played there. A hot air balloon was set up inside. It's enormous cavern which is there. So in salt in ancient times was a sign of wealth, and so for example, we've got the salt routes which lead through the Alps, and there's some places I've actually filmed in Austria showing these salt routes and these enormous castles which were built because of the salt trade, and because of and that is what would have made it important in times past. Indeed, Ivan the Terrible had built the town to be fortified, and I believe that the fortifications were visible until quite recently. And I say quite recently, I mean until last year. That's what I believe anyway. I don't know. I haven't been there. So the name itself was changed because of one comrade, Artyom. And Artyom was born in 1881. He was a Russian revolutionary, and he fled to Australia in around 1910, where he was known as Big Tom. So it could have got the name Big Tomovsk or something like that. That would have been a good name for it. In 1917, after the February Revolution, he returned to Russia, or the Soviet. Well, it wasn't quite the Soviet Union yet, wasn't. He returned to Russia, and he took part in the coup d'état in Kharkiv, which took the Bolsheviks to power there. And as in the Soviet, during the I don't know, Soviet Civil War, the Russian Civil War, whatever you want to call it, because the Soviet Union didn't exist until 1922. Then there was various groups fighting each other. He was killed, strangely enough, in an experiment on a high-speed train in 1921. And that seems a rather odd way to go. He was only aged then about 37, I think he was, or 39. I can't remember. 81, I can't remember. Anyway, whatever it was, he was under 40 when he got killed, and so it was a decision from Stalin, no less, to name the place Artemovsk, and Stalin even adopted his son. So that's where the name came from. So, and the name actually continues. For example, the wine, they call it some champagne. I thought it was pretty awful the one time I tasted the stuff. But they had this wine, and I think the factory still uses the name Artemovsk, a Ukrainian version of it. Now, so the point of the name and the reason for these attacks is, I think, it's obsession. Maybe it's obsession largely by one person, who is Yevgeny Prigozhin. And so he wanted to control, for his own business interests, what was around us. Things, the salt, you've got gypsum, there was once alabaster and other minerals as well. Well, alabaster is a mineral, it's a stone, but so that is what he has sought to actually control. The town in Soviet times was industrial center, and so it had a population of around 50,000 people or thereabouts by around 1939, and it was occupied by Nazi Germany on or around the 1st of November 1941, and it stayed occupied until the 5th of September 1943. It was always under military rule because it was very close, except for a period during the summer offensive of 1942. It was always very close to the front lines, and so it stayed under military rule. The population was about 9.6% Jewish, something like that. I can't remember the exact sum. And the Jewish people were murdered in January of 1942, having been collected in a park next to the NKVD office, and then they were taken to an alabaster mine, or abandoned alabaster mine, and actually killed there. So that gives sort of a bit of a background on the economic reasons for it. The thing is, I cannot say, of course, but I am assuming that the economic value would be very little after all this fighting. I mean, maybe salt, but salt these days doesn't have the value that it had 500 years ago. Now, so what about the losses? I'm sorry, somebody then sent a message relating to losses, and so it's just a YouTube Colonel McGregor site. I don't know who he is. Suggests as many 50,000 Ukrainians have been killed, making the Stalingrad reference apparently spot on. Okay, right, good. Is Bakhmut just a meat grinder in that case? Now, one of the arguments here is that it has been suggested as many as 100,000 enemy or Kremlin troops have been lost in Bakhmut, and 20% of which, 20,000, have been killed. That 50,000 reference, I don't believe it. I think that's nonsense. And I mean, I can't say, so I don't know, but I would say it's absolute nonsense. But I don't know where he's got his figures from. I would suggest, however, that Ukrainian dead probably does. I don't know. I just don't want to make a guess, but I would say that's out by at factor of 10, let's say. There is a logic, albeit all very horrible to say, the logic of the First World War of attrition being that if you can kill more of the enemy, then it's worth losing lives yourself. Of course, in the First World War, it's worked out that if 3 British and French died for every 2 Germans, then Britain and France would beat the Germans on the Western Front. In this case, if the logic was 10-1 or even 5-1, then again, obviously, Ukraine would win. Now, the Prigozhin is using these mercenaries, effectively, many of whom have been recruited from prisons or the likes. One has to wonder how many people are in prison in Russia. And also, we'd have to think, what about these Russian communities to which these prisoners will be going back? So if they've committed rape and murder and all sorts of pedophilia and things like this, and then they go back after a few months to the communities from which they committed these crimes, it shouldn't make the locals feel particularly safe, I would imagine. Now, why has Russia done so badly? Now, according to various sources, I'm going to quote one I've got here, is that because the fight, they're on foot, they're not using armored support, as Prigozhin himself has claimed that they're not getting the shells and what have you, but in the Russian army, shells are shared out more or less equally, whereas in our army, so Western armies, shells are sent to where they are needed. And that's not to say that everybody says they need more, of course. So everybody would claim, but they're sort of shared out more on a needs basis. And there is a good argument in favor of the Russian and communist way of doing things as well, because that's what the Soviet Union did at the same time. I don't think there was any doubt that eventually this whole town would be captured by the Russians. Having said that, I do rather hope, returning to the Stalingrad analogy, is that in 1942, by November 1942, the Nazis held 95% of Stalingrad, or at least on the western bank of the river. And therefore it was only tiny bridgeheads. And if you look even at the map, you can sort of look at it on Google Maps or something even today, and you can see the tiny areas still held by the Soviets. And of course one has to ask very seriously, why did they even bother? This was not the German army in the Second World War did very little street fighting, and it goes against all military logic to get involved in street fighting. But anyway, unless it's trying to grind people down. Therefore, in my opinion, this Bakhmut becomes something similar. What happened is that it's Stalingrad, the attacks were made to the north and to the south, which eventually encircled a huge encirclement, and one hopes that something similar might happen. In the case of Stalingrad, it went wrong to a large extent because there was often the Hungarians, Romanians, and Italians who had been themselves starved of equipment. It wasn't that they were worse soldiers or something like that. As often as portrayed, it's because they didn't have the same equipment. They were completely outclassed by the Soviet Union in terms of numbers and in terms of equipment. So that is why the lines just totally collapsed in that case. I think now, I think everybody was sort of aware that Bakhmut would actually fall. And the question is, what do they do now? Do they keep advancing, or do they try and hold it? If you look at a map of the Donetsk Oblast, you'll see that Bakhmut is very much it's in the north, but it's very much to the east. So there's a large part of the Donetsk Oblast, the Donbass area, which is to its west, and it's clear that the Russians are in no way capable of advancing any further. And Christopher writes, speculation about American and British pilots will end up flying the F-16s allotted recently, and thus should they be shot down, would be not subject to official POW status? Don't know. That's a legal question. If they, first of all, there aren't any there. They're not in them. They're not flying. There's no F-16s in Ukraine, so that's entirely. That's possibly totally unnecessary speculation. It's a bit like speculating what would happen if the Martians landed in Trafalgar Square. Well, it's not really relevant for the moment. I would say the F-16 should have been given to Ukraine last year. At the end of the day, United Kingdom and the United States guaranteed Ukraine's borders with the Budapest Memorandum in 29 years ago. So they're really utter obligation. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. If it had still had nuclear weapons, none of this would ever have happened. And so that's the problem. Not only that, I would say, taking that argument further, state will now give up its nuclear weapons, and I think when you've got the dangers like in places like India and Pakistan, which is probably far more dangerous, then unfortunately this has just made the world a much more dangerous place to be in. Right, so anyway, good. So I think I've said all I wanted to actually say on that one, and it's hard. I'm trying to find what people say for losses, because the thing is we just don't know. But all losses that I have seen are between 20 and 30,000. Sorry, if we're talking of dead. And so, and normally you operate on, it depends how somebody's wounded, how you contact, if a person's been wounded, how serious the injury is and all the rest of it. But you can count maybe 5 times. Colin writes, at Stalingrad, the Soviets knew that they would win when they saw the Germans fleeing eastwards into the pocket after the encirclement. Yeah. I've often wondered that one, because there was one account I read, and it was one person, he was on one of the bridges which they blew and then fled eastward, and saying how proud he was to be the last person there. I can't remember his name because I read this years ago. It's not like me forgetting Wilhelm Monk's name yesterday, but this I think I'm justified in forgetting. I've forgotten what, but I mean, it seems to be totally illogical in a state like in a state like that. Okay, very good. Thanks very much for being here. And tomorrow I might do another live chat, and I've even decided the subject, because name changes in Russia, place name changes in Russia. And one thing instantly I did want to say is about Bakhmut is this. If you look at the sources coming from the Kremlin sources, they refer to the name as Bakhmut. They give it its original name, the Turkic name, the Ukrainian name, the name that was returned to Bakhmut in 2016 and 2015. The law was passed, and then the decommunization in 2016. The non-communist name was given to it, and this is a bit odd, actually, given the fact that it is these more or less communist imperialists, if you like, or Nazi communist imperialists, because let's face it, there's not much difference between the two. They're using the name Bakhmut and not the communist name Artemovsk. So I find that quite odd. Having said that, if you look at literature published in the occupied part, the DNR, the DLR, sorry, DNR, what's DNR? DLR, Donetsk. No, sorry. The Russian Republic, Donetsk People's Republic, DPR, sorry, and then there they refer to it by the communist name, but the Russians from Russia, rather than the Russians from there, refer it to it by its original name. Thanks. Anyway, I think I missed that up at the end a bit, but anyway, I think you might have got the opinion, might have got what I was thinking. Thanks so much for watching. All the best from me, and I shall I'll do something tomorrow as well. So bye for now. If there's no more questions, no, that's it. So thanks for watching, and all the best. Thanks. See you tomorrow, Colin. Thank you. Bye.